What's up everybody, how's it going? It's Berk, aka Danzway here, and welcome back to the Final Fantasy IX Attack Only adventure on the channel. This is episode 3. In the previous episode we managed to wrap up disc 1 and beat Beatrix in order to progress the story further and see how far we can take this challenge, in which I tried to complete the game using only the attack command in battle and without the use of magic stones. So without much further ado, let's continue the story and see how far we can get in this episode. As always, thank you so much for the support so far in this series. Remember to hit that like button if you're continuing to enjoy yourself. And if you'd like to catch these episodes on early access while supporting the channel in a huge way, please do check out the Patreon. So we are back with Steiner and Garnet. In general at the moment, because I didn't have too many pieces of equipment that really gave you a strong strength boost in terms of accessories, I gave the yellow scarf to Steiner because he's the strongest one anyway, and he has the highest ceiling, so I wanted to make sure that he had the priority for the stronger piece of equipment. And so with that, it is time to face Black Waltz number 3 for the second time. This time he has 1292 HP, and we only have 3 party members to attack once again, so let's see what's going to happen here. Obviously elementals coming in, but only doing 50 damage to Marcus, which is good at least, because I mean you can see the levels are very low. And immediately a clutch critical from Steiner, which really helped in this fight. And once again, Garnet's ability to do maximum damage from the back row was also definitely helpful. So Marcus survives barely with 2 HP there, but very useful for us because he can tank one more hit and continue to chip in the damage. And so hopefully, even though he gets taken out, we should have enough to complete this one. I do think the critical helped me. Maybe if I didn't get that, I might have had to try this one again. But thankfully, it wasn't too difficult, and we managed to bring down the third Black Waltz for the second time. And so from here, there's going to be a lot more kind of story stuff. There isn't really a close boss battle coming up for a little while, so I'm going to I'll show you guys a few things in the background, some chests I picked up, and a couple of areas that I visited, and that kind of thing. But we are going to be focusing in on basically the kind of gameplay sections and the bosses to be able to get this done in a reasonable amount of episodes. You're also seeing some random encounters as well, just making sure you can see that I'm keeping up with them. Random encounters so far, they haven't been difficult at all. Obviously, that's one of those things where I'm never too sure, especially if you're not leveling up that much and you're using attack only. Are you going to run into, say, for example, a random encounter that is either immune to physical damage or really negates physical damage heavily, so you're going to get a bit stuck, it's going to be hard. So far, at least in the early going, the random encounters in the overworld have all been easy, and we've generally managed to be able to blast through. Now, in this episode, you're going to see me pick up something that could prove to be extremely important in this challenge, and another ingredient in that is being able to visit Quan's dwelling in the overworld. So if you go there, there's not much you can actually do in terms of like the actual additional story or anything like that here. But in the cave, there is a Stellazio, the Scorpio one to be more specific. And so that's something we're definitely going to pick up, and I will explain why that's relevant for people who don't know when I get to Treno. So that's another thing that's worth doing. And so with that, I was basically done with what I wanted to do in the overworld, and it was time to head to Treno. Now, in Treno, there wasn't really any boss battles per se, like anything too important, but in terms of equipment, there was at least a couple of important things that happened, and so we're going to discuss those before we move on. But a little bit of a disclaimer here, I recorded like a session here, but I made a mistake in my recording session, so the recording quality was a bit low. So apologies for that. It's not going to look as crispy as the content has been so far, but hopefully it's just for this particular episode, and things should be back to normal for the next one. Okay, welcome to the low quality recording session. It might not immediately hit you, but once you start watching it, you'll kind of see. I'll try to enhance it a little bit in post, but it's just not going to look very good compared to the first episode. But this is generally where we're at for now, having spent a little bit of time in the overworld and explored a couple of extra things. But in general, I would say I'm surprised that we've managed to make it through so comfortably, given my levels are so low at this particular point. So let's get into Treno and talk about, there's at least 2 major things that are worth discussing for this particular part. The first is basically making sure that you get the power belt. As its name would suggest, the power belt offers you a lot of strength bonus. It's a +3, It's one of the very few things in the game that offer a +3 in terms of strength. And so the sooner that we get one of those and equip it, the better. And so to make sure that I did this, again, I had my jagged.com guide up alongside. I'm not going to talk through the steps, but basically you have to move through things in a way where you confront the four-armed man who basically steals Garnet's money. And if you find him at the right place at the right time, he will give you a power belt. So I made sure I followed those steps in order to be able to get myself a power belt. So that's the first thing I did in Treno. Now after that, there's a second important thing, and this is related to the Stellasios once again. There are 2 Stellasios that you can pick up here. The first one is picked up by throwing money into the well, like the fountain, right at the start of Treno. If you do this a total of 13 times, you get the Gemini Stellasio. After you pick up the Gemini one, then you need to go to the slums area of Treno, and if you look in a particular corner, you're going to find the Taurus Stellasio. Now, once you have all of these, at this point, hopefully you should be ready to go and pick up what could prove to be one of the more interesting and useful weapons of this entire run that makes Steiner into an absolute powerhouse. But before that, I quickly pop into the shop to see what they have for me. There's definitely a few options here, but they're not that much better than what Zidane has already, but the Mithril Sword is particularly useful, so I grabbed myself one of those. Then I grabbed the Needle Fork as well for Quina when we get the chance. And so I spent a lot of gil here just to make sure that I had everybody kind of up to date with the best weapons that we had. The Bone Wrist here is also good because it gives you an attack bonus, and so I decided to buy Bone Wrists for everybody as well. So they were some of the main ones that I picked up. So after I made some purchases, it was time to visit the Queen's house. And this is where we get the reward for the Stellasios that we have been finding throughout the game so far. And so if you've been picking up all of them so far, you end up getting yourself the Blood Sword. The Blood Sword may just be the single best weapon in this challenge. Now, I've been going into the challenge relatively blind and just looking things up as I go along, so I don't know if there's any weapons in the future that also offer this same ability or that do it better or anything like that, but this particular weapon has more attack than Steiner's current weapon, and every time he attacks, however much damage he does, he gets that back as HP. Now, those of you guys that have been following the Attack Only adventures will know that one of the most problematic aspects of Attack Only is that you cannot heal very effectively in battle. There's very few battles where you can basically use the attack command and still heal at the same time. And so this is a really useful tool for us in this challenge, and it's going to make Steiner, who's already one of the most powerful characters we have, even more of a badass. And so maybe we'll be able to avoid using the magic stones to a larger degree because we don't need to kind of utilize passive abilities like auto potion or some kind of auto regen or whatever it might be, because we can naturally heal by just using the attack command. So the fact that it has like a built-in drain touch is really perfect, and so I was definitely happy about that. And so in terms of Treno, that was generally like the main things that I was after. I did do a little bit more shopping. I had a look at the synthesis shop to see if there was anything I wanted, and one of the main things that was there was the coral ring. You've already seen how useful the coral ring proved, and anything that absorbs elemental damage, again, it ticks that healing box and it helps us to survive much longer in battles. So anytime I find an accessory that can absorb an element, if I can get it, I try to generally get it because I know it's going to be useful to me. So I try my best to pick up things as I went along. And so from here, that was generally most of Treno. The rest of it is like dialogue and story and that kind of thing. And so we are going to skip ahead all the way to the beginning of the Gargan Rue area where things start to pick up once again and we face our next boss battle. So we are back to the Garnet, Steiner and Marcus team, and I equipped Marcus with a Mithril Sword as well. Every little helps. He's obviously not going to be in the party forever, but while he's there, since we only have 3 characters and Garnet is still not kind of naturally a physical attack powerhouse, I tried to have him be as powerful as he can to help us out in battles ahead. Steiner obviously has his Blood Sword now. My only thing with the Blood Sword is obviously right now it's very powerful and it works brilliantly, but once we get to, like, let's say the second half of the game, the attack power is obviously never going to go up. And one thing we've been learning so far from like the mechanics of the leveling up and the attack damage and the strength system, leveling up your raw strength stat is helpful, but it's not that helpful. and having a higher power attack weapon tends to be more beneficial. So I'm not sure if Steiner's strength going up over time is going to offset the amount to which his weapon's attack power is going to become weaker and weaker in relative terms as we move further through the story. So for now at least, the Bloodsword is awesome, but we'll see for how long it continues to be a viable way to do damage and to win boss battles. Okay, so I start to make my way through Garganru, picking up any chests or anything along the way, and after that, it's time to face a boss whose name I definitely cannot pronounce. It's something like Ralvarava. Let's see what happened in this fight. Here we go. This one has 2,296 HP. That's a lot more than the Black Waltz that we faced. So let's see. I mean, we're basically the same level as we were when we faced that guy, so we will have to see what's going to happen here. The first Blizzara comes in and it does 160 damage to Steiner, which is pretty high. I did not look up this fight to see like which elements I should protect against or anything. I wanted to just fight first and see what was going to happen. Steiner got back 496 HP. You can see at the moment at least how OP this Bloodsword weapon is. So Marcus gets poisoned here, but seeing Steiner get all of his HP back was so good. I'm like, basically as long as he doesn't get one hit KO'd, or he doesn't get a really nasty status effect, he basically can't beat Steiner. Steiner can basically solo this guy, which is insane. I think next we have to try and do like a can Steiner solo the entire game with attack only. But for now at least, he's definitely proving very useful. And so that boss battle, especially because of Steiner's huge damage, he did most of the heavy lifting. It turned out to be pretty light work. So other than literally the grind that I had to do for the very first cage boss, we've not had to do anything. And Steiner's still at the natural kind of base levels that he would have been at. And it's the same for Garnet and Marcus as well. So in that sense, it's worked out pretty well. And we can just keep moving things along without having to grind yet. So we will see when the next boss battle is, where we're going to need to up our levels and get stronger. But for now, we're still going well. So from here, the story flips back to Zidane, and we are back in the overworld again. This time at least, there isn't really too much to do. I tried to catch a few more frogs. That's the only thing that I did to try and continue kind of along that process, because there's one or two nice things to pick up, depending on how many you catch. But I didn't do too much. I wanted to kind of move the story forward. The random encounters were basically the same type of enemies that we'd seen before anyway, and so it wasn't too big a deal. And with that, we get to Clara's trunk. Now this was definitely a cool looking area. I made my preparations as always. The levels were looking pretty good. I mean, the others had kind of caught up to Zidane. I guess because the enemies give relatively such low experience points. Zidane obviously raced ahead to level 14, but he was struggling to go any further from there because obviously it's going to take him a lot of experience to level up any further. And so in the meantime, the others have been catching him up. Remember earlier when I spoke about not encountering random encounters that might be kind of resistant to physical? We met the Golem in Clara, and I thought this one might be a bit of a problem. I wasn't really sure what the best way to tackle this was, because the Jagged Guide literally says use magic-based attacks on the gem to make easy work of the fight. And obviously I can't do that. So I attacked the main body just to see what was going to happen here, and it kind of collapses down. And then while it was collapsed, I thought, let me attack the core, because obviously you're seeing at the moment the damage is very low. So almost nothing there. And while we wait for the next turn, the Golem's going to get back up. The core looks kind of energized. And so now I've switched my attacks to the core just to see what's going to happen. Zidane comes in, tries to attack the core, does big damage, but then gets countered for 256, which is a lot of damage. So we're attacking the core now. And it counters you every time. It went critical 384. And so Vivi's not going to like this counter, but it's a clutch dodge from him. And so now I was like, shit, like what's the best way to do this? And thankfully, Queena came in with a very like nice RNG hit for 600 on the core to take it out. So I'm not going to dwell for too long on the golems, but they were one of the first enemies that kind of potentially could have caused me a problem as a random encounter. From here on, it's going to be a lot of traversal, a lot of making sure I pick up equipment, thanks to the guide as always. And the random encounters, the golem himself was relatively difficult, but the other ones weren't too bad, thankfully, so I was able to like mostly breeze through those guys. And so with that, I was basically making my way up towards the top and towards the settlement. So we're going to move ahead to that part of the story. Once we reach the settlement, once again, it was a lot of dialogue, a lot of exploring around, a lot of talking. It's not really a boss battle heavy part of the story here. It's a lot more kind of exploration, going to new settlements, expanding the story, the dialogue, the relationship between the characters and that kind of thing. So in terms of recording, it was pretty chill, and it was kind of just making sure I was trying to progress things as quickly as possible to have the content needed to make the next episode here. But basically what we are going to do is skip quite a major chunk here, stuff that probably took me like 20 minutes to do, half an hour even with like speed up. And we are going to move straight onto the next major boss battle. And the first boss battle in quite some time that I thought could be quite dangerous. And that is against Antlion. So let's move ahead for that fight. Now, one of the only problems here was that I kind of forgot that this is where we fought Antlion, so I was just kind of racing through. And then I scrolled down in the guide and I saw Antlion. I was like, oh shit, like I might not be ready for this. And by the time I realized this, it's the point of the story in which Zidane is the only party member that you can actually see in the menu. So I could prep Zidane to some extent, but I didn't have any control over the other characters. And if I was too low level here for Antlion, I would need to load an earlier save and prepare people a little bit before coming back. So that's one important thing to note. And of course we don't have Steiner for this fight, who, as you've seen, would have been incredibly useful if we could have it. In the meantime, what I did do before facing Antlion was quickly check if I go down to like try to get out of basically Clara, can I do that to try and grind a few extra levels from this particular save point if necessary? The answer is partially yes, but only for Zidane, because he's the only one in the menu. When you go outside of the settlement, the other party members don't come back, and so Zidane is on his own. And so the only thing I could have done here is either level up Zidane by himself once again, or I would have had to load an earlier save in order to level up the whole party. So you're seeing him take on a zoo here, and even by himself he's still able to take the zoo down, and so that was promising. But the boss battle we are facing now is going to be a bit of a different level to anything that we've faced so far. And so here we go. Antlion, 3,938 HP, and it has some pretty brutal attacks. Let's take a look at what happened here. 280. So it's going to take a fair few attacks. 120 from Queener. I already felt like this is going to be one where Queener's going to need to do some good RNG. Counterhorn comes in for 90 damage. I thought, okay, Vivi's back row, so that's not too bad. At least he's handling that. And then Sandstorm comes in. Take a look at this move and its effects. For those that don't remember or that are unfamiliar, it brings you down to within an inch of your life and gives everyone darkness. This is the game's way of saying to you guys, you need to use magic attacks. But it also pushes Zidane to trance, and so he does big damage. But the counterhorn comes in and he gets immediately KO'd. So I think we've probably done about 1,500 damage, something like that at this point. And most of our hits are missing. Well, to be fair, at this stage we've got a bit lucky. We're still hitting a few times, but it's still looking like it's probably not going to be enough. And we're always within one counterhorn of dying. So I could already tell from here this was looking like a bit of an RNG fight, because it doesn't counterhorn every single time. And so if Zidane manages to stay alive and not get countered, then he might be able to land a few hits in trance, and that could potentially make the difference. But for this first attempt at least, I definitely got wiped out, and I just could not keep up because the Sandstorm just came in too early and I did not stand a chance. Then it has a move called Trouble Mucus, which we didn't get to see the effects in this particular attempt, but there's another one which I'm going to show you guys in which it did affect things. And I got so close to winning, but because of the Trouble Mucus, I still died. So let's have a look at the next attempt. Okay, here we go. Once again, I didn't really plan for Zidane to go into trance in this fight. So far, at least, I've still been going with the flow, no planning for this stuff. But it worked out very well that he was going to enter trance. That was definitely something that was needed. If I couldn't have done that, I would have potentially just kind of moved him back outside Clara and kind of farmed and fought until he was close to trance and then came back. But it naturally kind of happened anyway, so that was definitely beneficial. But in this fight, Queener got the trouble status early on. Now the trouble status basically means that when that character takes damage, the other party members take 50% of the damage that they took. So if they get counterhorned, is going to do more damage to everybody. Then a second character got trouble as well, and so this was starting to look pretty nasty on that front. But good damage from Zidane, and I was definitely going to need his trance ability and the added power here that comes with it to be able to do all of this damage before dying. 504, also good RNG from Queener there. But now look at everybody's HP, it all comes down. And so this makes it incredibly dangerous. So Sandstorm finally comes in, and this second attempt also kind of showed me that Sandstorm is not programmed to be like one of the first major attacks. So again, if you get decent RNG, you might not see Sandstorm for a while in this particular battle. And so that was already looking like it could be useful. But then the counter horn comes in on a troubled character, and when you have single-digit HP, the counter horn hitting a troubled character kills everybody. And so it ended up being a really unlucky. I was very close there. I think I was one hit away. And I died because Zidane had trouble status and because the counter horn triggered when he made the hit. So I was very close, but it didn't quite work out. And so let's see how attempt number 3 went. I knew that I could get close and that this was a bit of an RNG one. And so I decided to just keep trying this one until I got the win. Attempts 3 and 4 did not work out, and by this stage I'd already put the fast forward on because I was like, I do not know if this is going to take 5 attempts or 15, 20 attempts, and I wanted to race through them as quickly as possible. But thankfully, on attempt number 5, we managed to beat Antlion. So let's quickly see the winning attempt and how the moveset went. Basically, we need to see Sandstorm happening as late as possible in this fight. That's one of the main things. If that happens, then you already have a pretty good chance of winning. And if Zidane's first attack is met with a counter horn and he goes immediately into trance, then obviously that's also going to really increase our chances. So let's see what else happened here. But he's already almost dead here. He's taken quite a lot of damage from these counter horns. But he landed a critical there, 1,260 damage. I reckon without the critical we'd still definitely have won. But the critical really fast-tracked things, and we were able to beat Antlion. So definitely one of the most dangerous bosses we've faced so far. But thankfully, with the RNG that we had, like if it was programmed to use Sandstorm as his first attack every time, then I think it would have either not been possible at these levels, or we would have had to have had a lot more attempts. But thankfully, we got the job done, and we were able to beat Antlion in the challenge. And so from here, once again, we have a lot more cutscenes. Freya does the dance, and we are able to move things along in the story once we are done with Antlion. But at least for this part, once we are done with the storyline stuff, there's no rest here. We basically continue straight on with the escape, and the Alexandrian soldiers are going to come after us. So again, I get myself set up. I have a look if there's anything that I kind of need to do, but I'm generally, obviously, getting more and more optimized now. I'm starting to get equipment across the board, like across all of the different body parts that can give me some kind of strength boost. And so we should be ready for the battles ahead against Alexandrian soldiers. So let's have a look at this. We meet 2 of them. I wasn't anticipating anything particularly difficult after the Antlion, but let's see. 406. Vivi I'm still keeping back row for now. I think once Vivi is kind of beefed up enough, and he has enough HP to really start surviving some hits, then I'm just going to move him to the front row anyway for extra damage. But I think for like another 2, 3, 4 levels at least, I'm going to keep him in the back row and just keep him safe for as long as possible, because Vivi is precious and should be kept safe at all costs. But yeah, you saw the Alexandrian soldiers were not a problem here, and we're able to generally continue through. You encounter a black mage as well. Again, not a problem. We've faced those guys a few times already. And once we are done with all of that, the drama kind of continues in Clara, and we are going to try to save as many people as possible, with the final battle being against Beatrix once again. So a lot of things happen in Clara, but I'd faced Beatrix before, and I generally knew the formula to be able to increase my chances of being able to beat her. Now, Beatrix hits very hard, has a lot of HP, but the saving grace against Beatrix is that if you can survive for long enough against her, then the battle automatically ends. So you can either deplete all of her HP to end the fight, or you survive for long enough to be able to continue. Now, she has 4,736 HP, which is very high, and unlikely for us to be able to take all of that out before she kills the party. But what we can do is survive long enough. And one of the main ways in which we can do this is by having our coral rings. She has an attack that generally does quite a lot of damage, but that is lightning based and can be healed from if you have coral rings. So the main thing I did was prepare the party and give Freya and Zidane coral rings to make sure that they could absorb the damage that comes in from Beatrix. Now I thought there's still maybe a chance, depending on how the moves go, to be able to do the raw damage, and so I still kind of, I had like a midway strategy that was both potentially attacking and potentially defensive. So I think for this particular fight, because surviving is potentially more important than doing the damage, you could move everybody to the back row. It might help against like at least one of her attacks. But for now I kept Vivi at the back only, and I equipped coral rings on Zidane and Freya, and I of course equipped some stuff to reduce lightning damage as well. So let's see how the second fight went against Beatrix. The music's tense here, man. So Vivi getting the first attack, probably not ideal. Thunder Slash, there it is, but it hit Queener. Would have been nice if it hit Freya or Zidane, but Queener also harms lightning, so definitely did less damage there. But a nice 408 there, so I thought maybe there's a chance I could do enough damage here. A clutch dodge from Vivi, and so far at least we're doing pretty well. But almost 5,000 HP is a lot to ask for, and Shock comes in and takes out our biggest damage dealer. So much like the first fight, Shock is doing more damage than my highest HP character has, and I think it basically does the same damage to everybody. Once again, I remember seeing it multiple times, and whether you're back row, front row, it seems to basically do the same damage to everyone. Not sure if you can defend against it with some particular armor or something, but from what I could see, without doing any extensive testing, Shock basically was always a one-hit KO for me. It's definitely not lightning based, I know that much. So Vivi goes into trance here, but it's not going to make too much of a difference. We just need to survive at the moment. But another shot comes in, and you can see, I mean, 50 less HP than Zidane. It's definitely not back row related, like maybe it's magic defense possibly, but in general, Shock is the one move where if she chooses to use it repeatedly, like she uses it 4 times too quickly, then basically we're not going to be able to survive. So that's the kind of RNG side of things with her. She needs to not use Shock too many times. I think it's like 9 attacks or 10 attacks or something we need to survive. And so that means that we need to have less than 4 Shocks being used in 9 attacks. So 2 Thunder Slashes was really nice there. And so I thought maybe Freya can solo this. Let's see, can she survive long enough? She can. So thankfully, the Coral Ring shows its worth here. Twice it managed to heal Freya, and as a result she survived long enough to end the fight, and we get to continue on past the second Beatrix fight in the game. Okay, with that we are able to move on to Alexandria Castle, and for this one the party has been split up. Once again we have Steiner and Marcus together. They're going to have a brief period in which they get to kind of fight together once they break out from their cage, but Marcus will be leaving the party soon, and so I have to make sure that I equip him with like the crappiest stuff so that I don't lose anything that could be potentially useful to me. So the two of them do face Alexandrian soldiers, but because Steiner is so powerful, we don't need Marcus to have anything in particular that's been equipped here, and so Steiner takes care of business and we're able to continue on. Once we are done with Steiner's section, this is where the countdown timer comes into play and we need to save Princess Garnet. Now this part of the game you are able to fight an optional boss called Tantarian, and this boss is like, for this part of the game, is basically almost like a super boss. I think it has like 21,000 HP or something like that. It's a no-go. Like, I didn't even bother facing Tantarian in this one. I know there's going to be people curious about it. We get another chance to fight Tantarian, and I think the second time round I'll definitely give it a go. But under these particular circumstances, I mean, we can barely beat Beatrix, and that's because we let her get enough turns to end the fight. So something that has 5 times as much HP as Beatrix at this point, we're not going to beat, and so I didn't even bother with that. I just wanted to make sure I got through the countdown as quickly as possible. And that's partly because we also have a boss battle that is mandatory to face during the countdown. And it's time to face those pesky little shits, Zorn and Thorn. So let's have a look at their boss battle. So I had an immediate look at my setup here. In general, everything you can see, once again, we're kind of power centric here. I wanted to kind of trust my chances to power through everything. Zorn and Thorn, again, I didn't really look up anything in advance on what to do against them. Maybe I should have gone for some potential elemental protection, I don't know. But for now, at least, it was kind of all guns blazing and trying to do as much damage as possible quickly. So let's begin the fight and have a look. Now, Zorn has a very beefy 4,896 HP, but Thorn only has 2,984. This is important because as long as you beat one of them, you can end the fight overall. And so we're going to be deliberately targeting Thorn more than Zorn so that we can take out that 2,900 as quickly as possible. Now, in terms of how their mechanics actually work, they kind of need each other to be able to perform attacks. And so Thorn gives Zorn meteor power. If you don't attack Zorn now in time, because it was able to dodge Zidane's attack there, I couldn't stop it from using Meteorite. So basically Meteorite comes in. This was worrying. I thought, is this some kind of big wipeout move? Thankfully it barely did any damage. And so basically while one of them doesn't have power, I'm trying to focus my attacks on Thorn to take him out as quickly as possible. So if you attack the right one at the right time, you basically stop them from attacking. Zidane gets another critical there as well. And so especially when criticals come in as well, and Steiner's got the blood sword, they're not going to survive for very long. 3,000 HP is definitely very doable at this stage when Zidane and Steiner are basically doing about 1,000 damage or close to it, just the two of them alone. So I knew I was pretty close to beating Thorn. I was just using Vivi as the neutralizer, and the other three, I was just attacking Thorn at this point. And so, yeah, literally in no time at all, I was able to take them out. If, let's say, Meteorite was some big, 500 damage move, then the battle would have looked a lot different. But ultimately, I was kind of surprised at how weak their magic was. So thankfully, it was all good, and we were able to continue and save Princess Garnet. Once this entire episode is done, guess who we have to fight again? It's time for the third and thankfully final battle against Beatrix. At this stage, you guys know the setup. I don't need to talk through it. Let's just get straight in there and see if once again we can survive for long enough to get through against the powerful Beatrix. Here we go. Thankfully, the backgrounds in this are static. As a result of that, the quality doesn't look so bad. The quality falls apart when there's movement on screen. But thankfully the background staying static helps the quality hold up a bit. And the movement's relatively muted, so it's not as bad. So I'm relieved that the quality's held up enough and I didn't end up wasting the recording session. But yeah, she has 5,709 HP here. The first shot comes in on Steiner, 988. Again, it's just we're not surviving against shock. We just have to hope that she doesn't do it too many times back to back. Especially once either Steiner or Zidane is dead, the hopes of doing 5,700 damage before we all die just really diminishes. And she gives herself a Cura to boot, so that's close to, 800. It's 6,500 HP that we have to take out. It's almost double the Antlion. So, yeah, it wasn't going to work really. Thunder Slash didn't come in on Zidane as well, which wasn't ideal. A nice critical there, though, from Freya. But the second shot comes in, and it's against Vivi, which was perfect. So we're still in with a chance here. I still didn't think we'd be able to do the damage at this stage, and that miss was not good. Yeah, and Zidane gets KO'd as well. So Freya's our final hope, but this time she basically immediately comes in with a shock again, and she KOs us. So for the third Beatrix fight, we did lose on our first attempt. Now, let's count how many moves you have to survive against Beatrix to be able to win the fight. This was attempt number 2. I probably should have moved everyone to the back row against her at this stage. You just can't do the damage needed. These attacks would do half damage, for example. So that's one move she's done. But Steiner, man, the way that he can heal up is just insane. He can stay front row. That's 2 attacks. If she does shock less than 1 in every 4 attacks, then we're okay. But on the 3rd attack, she uses shock. But it is against Vivi, which is the best outcome here, unfortunately. Sorry, Vivi. You know we love you. And she does shock back to back. Definitely do not want to see that. It's 4 attacks. Okay, this is move number 5. Thankfully, these two are resistant. Well, they absorb lightning, so that's going to help. That's move number 6. A lot of damage, but Freya could survive another one of those potentially. 7. Now we're looking better. There's still a chance for her to use 2 shocks though. 8. So I think we have to survive 1 more move. 9. There we go. So on the 10th move, I think she decides to end the fight, basically. So thankfully, she used shock twice back to back, but then afterwards she ends the fight and doesn't use any more of them. So perfect. And with that, that is the 3rd and final boss battle against Beatrix. So we will not have to face her again in this playthrough. We are done. Now, thankfully, after this boss fight, Beatrix sees the error of her ways and decides to help the party, which is dope because as an attack-only kind of character, she is excellent. So her and Freya are going to fight together for a little while, and I will show some of this in the background. We are fighting Bandersnatchers on our continued kind of escape from Alexandria Castle, and during that, Freya and Beatrix are more than powerful enough that they'll completely destroy the Bandersnatchers. That's no problem. And the rest of the gang will have to take on Bandersnatchers and Mages. Again, these are not a problem. They're a little bit more powerful than the previous ones, but honestly, not enough to cause a major issue. So, like, they can survive more attacks, definitely. You need, like, I think about maybe 700 or so damage. I'll annotate in how much HP they have. But ultimately, thanks to both Zidane and Steiner in particular, they're still not going to survive long enough to basically be a legitimate KO threat as we're trying to escape. So we're all good. And so the escape continues until we get back to the Garganru area and we face yet another boss. This one's called Ralvui Margo, something like that. Has 3,352 HP and is rather dangerous. This fight, I didn't immediately know how to win this one. Let's have a look at this first attempt and then I'll explain what happened. So 3,300 is not too bad, but there's only 3 characters here. Again, Steiner's gone, and there's no Freya either. So Thundara straight away. This is something I can at least prepare for. You saw everyone took damage there, so for like a subsequent attempt, I can make sure that I protect against lightning. So you attack, and it reacts to the attack and becomes compact. Now, in an attack-only challenge, obviously I've already committed to continue attacking here. 31 damage, and it comes back with Earth Power, which does damage to everybody. Basically a Quake-type move. Almost 200 damage, and I only did 31 in return. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? Because I attack once, it curls up, and then, well, I'm kind of stuck. I have to attack. It's an attack-only challenge. And, well, oftentimes I've already just pressed attack. And this is terrible, because we kind of get caught in a bad pattern. If it's the case that Zidane attacks, then maybe it's a little bit better. Like, Zidane does the full damage and then it curls up. But even then, you might only get, like, 3 or 4 attacks in, and that's just not enough in terms of HP. And then Ultrasound Wave comes in to make things even worse, and you get the mini status. So mini Zidane in an attack-only challenge is definitely not doing anything. And so, yeah, we failed our first attempt pretty miserably against this guy. And I was thinking, what are we supposed to do to be able to avoid this? I mean, we've got Thunder that hits everybody, which we can mitigate, definitely. But we have the counter, which is very damaging. We have the kind of curling up, which really mitigates the damage that we can do. And then we have the mini status to deal with as well. So there's a lot of dangerous factors for this particular boss. Now, unfortunately, I'd forgotten one of the coral rings on Freya. And here I made a mistake. I was supposed to equip desert boots, but I equipped Germanus boots by mistake. I misread. They both do earth stuff, but one raises your earth attack and the other one reduces earth damage. So I needed the desert boots, not the Germanus boots. Ultimately it wouldn't matter because I figured out how to win the fight, but that was a mistake, just so you guys know. So I went back in. For another round. This time I was slightly better protected against earth. Well, not really against earth because I made a mistake, but at least against lightning, the Thundara attack that I did do. But ultimately I needed to just kind of fight a little bit more and experiment with a couple of things to see what's going to happen. Now immediately Ultrasound Wave comes in. At least it hits Garnet, which isn't, I guess, the worst option. Zidane's going to have to obviously do the heavy lifting in this fight anyway. So 420. I mean, he's going to need about 8 hits of that. And so how are we going to get Zidane to survive 8 hits? Maybe Thundara's going to heal him, maybe not. But the first thing I did in my next attempt was wait. And you can see it uncoils. So I wondered, is it still going to use its counter anyway? Like, yes, you're going to do more damage, but do you still deal with the counter? The answer is no. And so this is the trick to this particular boss. You just wait. And so at this stage, you can see me start to speed things up here. You can lock this boss into an endless loop of just compacting itself. As I understand it, I think when it releases itself, it kind of resets its ATB. So you always get the next move. So you watch it. As soon as the release animation happens, if you just select attack, you always get your attack before it does anything. And so it actually trivializes the fight. And so this was a big relief. So the key was just to attack. Don't attack again, just wait. As soon as you see the animation, attack again, and you always get your turn first. Because I assume like the uncoiling is also a move, and so it uses up its ATB and has to reload it again once it uncoils. That's my assumption, but that's generally how it looks like it works anyway. And thanks to that, a boss battle that could have been very difficult ended up being pretty trivial, and we did make it through. And so I think I will end this particular episode here. Thankfully, there wasn't anything too dramatic in this one. The Antlion was a little bit dangerous, and there was a couple of close shaves against Beatrix. But we did manage to find a way through, especially against that final boss. Thankfully, I realized that you can just kind of sit there and wait for it to uncoil. And that really uncoiled the fight, and we managed to continue through. So as I'm talking now, the next part of the story is Pinnacle Rocks. Nothing happens here in terms of fighting or gameplay, really. This is just a bit of a little story/lore section where you recruit Ramuh into your party. And so as you guys watch that process, I am going to wrap things up for this episode. Hope you are continuing to enjoy the series. It hasn't been as brutally challenging as Final Fantasy VIII so far, so from that perspective, I don't think it's been as cool. But I just generally really enjoy the style and the feel of Final Fantasy IX, so it's still, regardless, really nice to come back to it. Because the gameplay is still relatively different to Final Fantasy VIII, I'm still thinking about different things. I'm actually looking at shop menus, I'm actually kind of referencing stuff and just kind of trying to get my setups correct. With Final Fantasy VIII, a lot more of it, yes, it was much harder, but the reason it was harder oftentimes was just because you have to kind of bash your head against the wall until you get the right RNG, which, you know, is a challenge, but in some ways as well, it's not always as fun. But of course, it has its downsides too. So I think Final Fantasy IX is definitely easier, but it's a little bit more balanced and you have a little bit more things to work with. Using the guide, making sure I'm not missing any important items or equipment or anything like that. In general, that kind of stuff has come in helpful. I mean, you've seen a lot of boss battles where the equipment that I've had has made all the difference. And so that side of things has been fun because I am more of I do like to try and think of strategies and setups and preparation and that kind of thing. That's part of what makes like difficult battles or just challenges in general, or even the general gameplay of these games so much fun to me. So Final Fantasy VIII, obviously, I learned a lot playing that, and some really awesome things happened, and I had to come up with some really great strategies. It's a really fun series. But Final Fantasy IX, I think, is a little bit more closer to, like it still feels a little bit more like the standard gameplay experience, but with just a little bit more focus on preparation and setup and that kind of thing. And still, through this one as well, so far I've definitely learned some new things about the game. As always, to continue to support these wacky projects, please consider checking out the Patreon. It really helps in a massive way. The more I do of these like Attack Only series, obviously if you look through each one, every single one has less and less views as I go on, and they still take the same amount of time. Like Final Fantasy VIII took more time than Final Fantasy VII, but as the views get lower and lower, it's the kind of thing where I'm essentially just getting less and less for my time. And so if it reaches like a tipping point, I basically have to stop creating a particular series because I could be using that time on something that might potentially do better on the channel that I'm still going to enjoy and that you guys are going to as well. So if you want me to continue to make this type of content, one of the great equalizers, as I always say, is the Patreon stuff. And it really helps, especially for content like this that takes a long time to put together, where even getting, say, 5,000 views per episode is kind of on the bare minimum level of keeping it sustainable long term. Because if you look at the numbers from, say, like Final Fantasy X Auto Battle or Final Fantasy VII, like they were definitely much, much bigger. And it was kind of funding itself despite the length of time they take. But unfortunately at this stage we're starting to get towards that tipping point where once this one's over, I'm going to have to think long and hard about whether to do any more Attack Only or whether to find something new. So if you do want to continue to see this type of material, it definitely goes a very long way. So thank you all for the support, and I will be back with more soon as we hopefully try to complete Disc 2 and move things forward in the story. Thank you for watching. Take care.